Hey guys, TommyBryson here, and what exactly is the iPhone 6 money rule and how can it make you a lot wealthier? Now, we all know exactly what an iPhone is. We know that whenever somebody pulls out an iPhone 6, it's kind of like, what is that? That phone is like 8 years old. What are you doing with that? And by the way, the iPhone 14 is about to come out, okay? And by the way, the iPhone 6 rule is very simple. It's buying what you need until you can buy what you want. And this rule was passed on to me by my mom, who got it from my grandma, who she got it from her mom, which is basically my great grandmother. So if you actually learn this rule, it can actually make you a lot of money. And it's the reason I am where I am. And it's funny because it all starts with a simple iPhone 6 little money rule. And as always, guys, destroy the like button. I appreciate it a ton. And if you're new here, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell to get notified because I post videos all the time on investing and also making passive income. Now, Tommy, break down this iPhone 6 rule for me. What is it exactly? Well, in reality, my grandma, the only phone she has is a landline. That basically means the phone is attached to a line, so when you call her, she picks it up, she answers it, and there are no apps on this phone. All you can do is talk on this phone, and you have to be right there to talk to the person. But my grandma managed to have around 10 kids, live right next to a river, in a shed with all these kids in pure poverty, take them all out of poverty, have 2 houses, and become basically a secret millionaire, okay? Which is absolutely insane. But she managed to do this just by using the iPhone 6 rule. Now, the very first thing is, guys, Tommy, what do you mean by the iPhone 6, okay? I know someone that has an iPhone 6 and they don't have a lot of money, so this can't be true. Well, here is the thing. When it comes to being rich and having money or whatever, like, oh my gosh, I'm rich. Rich people usually show you everything they have. They want to show you the wealth. You can tell usually somebody is rich by your interpretation. You see the trophy wife, you see the fancy car, you see the big house, but what you don't see is their bank account. You don't see their net worth. You don't see that they're basically almost on the edge of bankruptcy. But when it comes to true wealth is basically something you don't see. It's basically almost invisible. It's your neighbor that drives a Toyota, that has, for example, a beautiful wife, has some kids, has a very similar career as you do, and you think he's just like you, but all of a sudden you find out they have, for example, like $1 million or $2 million basically invested. The home is paid off, the car is paid off, and they basically just work because they want to. You see, true wealth is everything you don't see. It's all the things they chose not to buy to have the option to buy freedom. That is what wealth is. And that's the crazy thing. Now, how does this apply again to the iPhone 6 rule? Again, it's very simple because the iPhone 6 rule is you buy what you need until you can buy what you want. Now, I want to ask you guys a very honest question. How much of you guys can basically afford to buy an iPhone 13 or 14 when it comes out? The price is probably going to be $1,000. To buy 10 iPhones, that's going to be somewhere around $10,000. Can you afford to buy 10 of these iPhones? If the answer is no, then you have no business owning one of these phones because it's too expensive. On top of that, it's also a liability. And most people out there, they can't even afford to manage a $1,000 expense. Now, you answer this question also, how is it possible that I can go to my friend's house and I walk into his house is prettier than mine. He has a bigger TV than me. He drives a better car than I do. And he has 0 books in the library. And on top of that, he's broke. Okay? How is that possible? And he also has a better phone than I do. Because by the way, I might not have an iPhone 6, but I have an iPhone X, which is basically about almost 4 years old also. The idea, guys, is that the iPhone 6 rule is when you buy things that you don't really need, but you just want. And because you do this, it basically disables you from being able to buy the things you really do need and to invest into the things you actually are going to use to actually build wealth. Let me explain here. It might start off, for example, with the phone you have, but it ends with where you live. If you're living somewhere where you're spending more than 40% or a third of your monthly income on rent or a mortgage, it's too expensive. If you're driving a car that you have to pay a monthly payment on because you basically have to borrow the money, it's too expensive, you can't afford it. If you have an iPhone that you're paying for with a company because you basically wanted the phone but you wanted the company to pay for you can't afford it. If you're spending a bunch of money on food, having to use a credit card like crazy, you're going into crazy debt, that's the iPhone 6 rule. You can't afford that lifestyle. The iPhone 6 rule basically means you buy what you need until you can buy what you want. I have a friend. He has an iPhone 6 and he says all the time, Tommy, this iPhone 6 does not define the people I have around me. The important things to me are building wealth and having freedom. And me buying, for example, the latest iPhone is not going to give me any of that stuff. That's just $1,000 less than I had before, and it doesn't help me whatsoever. That's what it is, okay? Now, I want to be real with you guys, okay? Because although this was passed on to me by my mom, it wasn't something I started putting into practice until much later on. Because I had the iPhone 7 when it first came out. I bought all the things that I basically wanted when I wanted it. And I was basically very, very broke because of that, okay? And I realized that a lot of it is just marketing. And when it comes to marketing, there's something called status. And status is a very powerful thing. And believe it or not, iPhones give you a massive status boost, okay? When you have that little square one, people be like, okay, that's the new one. When you send somebody a text and there's a blue bubble, oh my gosh, it must be cool. There are status symbols involved when it comes to a phone, when it comes to the house you live in, when it comes to the car you drive. All these things carry a status symbol. And there are 3 ways to acquire status in a sense. You can basically earn it, inherit it, or just buy it. Earn it basically means I worked very hard, I bought what I needed, I didn't buy what I want, I invested my money, I built it over time, and then I was able to buy this thing and that thing because I actually earned it, okay? And on top of that, their status usually comes from the careers they have. That's where they get that respect from. You also have people that inherit the wealth, whereas basically, I have all these things, I look like I'm wealthy, but remember, I just really got this money from my daddy or my mommy or my grandpa that just passed away. And you have people that they basically just buy it. They want status, they want respect, they want to look fancy, and all they work hard for money, they spend all the money on acquiring those status symbols without really having a foundation of real wealth. And they're just, for example, a few pitches away from losing everything they have. That's super, super dangerous. And if you ask me, I always want to be on the side of, hey, I earned this. I have the money for this. I did this first. I waited a little longer than everybody else. But now whenever I buy, for example, the next iPhone 14 or whatever the iPhone is, I can buy it knowing, hey, I can buy 10 of these. I can buy 20 of these. I can buy 1,000 of these. I don't have to worry about this. It's not really a big deal. But whenever you buy something that's a big amount of your net worth and it's also a liability, when you buy something that's basically $1,000 and you don't even have $1,000 in your bank account, it's not a good idea. So overall, what is a simple tip I can give you? Take a look at your budget. If you don't have one, make one. Take a look at the 4 essential expenses, which are basically going to be shelter, utilities, groceries, and transportation. Within those right there, what are your needs and what are your wants? And if you have those wants in there, cut them out. Because if you want to get to financial freedom, if you want to have passive income, if you want to have money invested, if you want to take care of the things that really matter, you got to cut those wants out and stop worrying about instant gratification for the moment. That's the idea, okay? So for me personally, for the longest time ever, whenever I had, for example, this phone, which is actually pretty old, the battery eventually goes bad. And then you start to say, well, I'm just going to buy a new phone. No, just buy a new battery. They cost like $30 on Amazon, a new battery. They'll charge you like $50 to install it. That's $80 instead of paying, for example, $1,000. You do that, for example, every 2-3 years. The money you would have spent on a new phone, you invest that. You start working on that. And by the way, I also want to give you a little plan if you made it all the way to this point of the video, and comment down below, I made it, so I know you made it to this point of the video. When it comes to achieving financial freedom and the way this whole thing was passed on to me is pretty simple. First, make sure you don't have that much debt, because the person that's constrained by a lot of debt, life is going to be a lot harder. When you're borrowing money to do everything, when you owe money on student loan debt, when you have money in the car loans, when you have money in the credit cards, try to eliminate all that debt except the mortgage. Once you're free from that, that's great. Automatically, you're put in a position that most people will never be in. Number two, have an emergency account. This way, when things go wrong, eventually they do, things go bad, you have enough money set aside to take care of yourself. Have 3 months worth of your expenses, or 6 months, even better. And then focus on investing into retirement. That means investing 10-20% into your Roth IRA, into your 401k with your employer to get that free money. It takes time to develop this wealth. But what else are you going to do? Spend that money on the iPhone? The answer is no, probably not a good idea. And then you work on buying your home. But buying a home you can actually afford. The home where I live right now, guys, I have a hefty investment account. I have no debt. I have basically all my things taken care of, but it was all because I didn't buy the latest iPhone. I didn't buy the car I wanted. I didn't buy the house I wanted per se, the mansion and all these things. It's about saying no to the things you want until you can actually afford to actually get them. It's a process. So when you own this home, you get it on a 15-year mortgage. You try to pay it off a lot faster, so you don't really have that much things to worry about. And then when you get to that point, you're basically free. You have an investment account that's very large. You have a home you actually own, and you're put in a different position where if you want to buy the latest iPhone, it's not going to register as a blip on your radar. $1,000 won't matter that much because you can afford to actually own it. But if you're buying something right now that to buy it, you got to think about it 10 times, that's probably a sign that you shouldn't buy it right now because you can't afford it right now. And that's just me being honest, okay? Because there's a lot of things that I want, because there's always a next level. I want this rental property. I want this. It never ends. It never ends, okay? So it's important you know exactly what your values are and what your needs are, and you work based on that. Guys, thanks for watching. That is the iPhone 6 rule. Shout out to my friend from Instagram. I actually got that idea from him. On top of that, shout out to my grandma, because she did the execution on this whole thing, okay? So as always, like, subscribe, hit the bell to get notified, comment down below any questions, DM me on Instagram if you have any questions too. Up here is another video, and here is my face. Please subscribe. And as always, Long Term Team officially out.